So hello and welcome to the Expat Pod. My name is James, your host, and today I'm joined by Marie, who we actually met by you commenting on a Facebook post I put on a podcasting group chat. So first of all, thank you for doing that. Thank you for getting in touch, and thank you for being with me and willing to share your amazing story about where you've lived. If you'd like to give a quick brief overview of all the stops along the way that you've taken and where you're from originally.
Oh, thank you. I'm pleased to be here. I'm British. I lived in Zurich for about nearly 5 years. Then I was back in the UK, and then I took off travelling, and I wound up in Peru, which is where I am now, and that'll be the subject for our chat today.
Wonderful. Well, what a great introduction. So hello and welcome to section 1 of the podcast, all about getting there. So Marie, you've mentioned that you're now in Peru. Do you want to tell us a bit more about the kind of journey you got from being back in the UK to eventually landing in Peru, or, stopping there, and why you chose that to be your destination?
Well, that's quite a long story. I started off traveling. I was super fit at the time. I'd been training with a personal trainer for about 2 years, and I could just do whatever I wanted to do. I was so fit. So I went to the States for a while. I hiked Grand Canyon down and up in a day. I did loads of things. But the backpacker lifestyle was not for me. I just wasn't enjoying living out of a bag. And I ended up back in Chicago. I went back to where I'd took the first B&B. And when I got back, the lady that owned the guest house was really suffering. She could barely leave the house. She'd got a horrible condition. And I said, she had apartments. And I said, look, if you give me an apartment for the remainder of my visa stay, I'll run your business. And I did that. I met loads of people from all over the place. It was a beautiful part of Chicago on the Gold Coast, and I really enjoyed it. But then, I knew that I wasn't going to be spending more time there. And I wanted to do a trip. And I thought I'd just go to Mexico or Canada, because I've got friends in Canada. And I thought Mexico would be easy. But I had to leave the whole of North America to renew my visa back into the States. So, yeah. So I had this book. It's right on my shelf here, The Hero's Journey. I had this book, and I wanted to do it, and I thought, why don't I just go and do that on sacred ground? It was some training I'd done before I left, and it's about finding your life purpose and really centering home in what you want, what you really want to create. And I was at that point in my life where I wanted to know that. I'd left everything in the UK in search of my mission, really. So that's what I decided to do. Decided to go sacred ground and do that. And then, so I got here in this town, actually, and it all went from there. So my journey was from the UK to the States, and then making my way down. To get here, normally, my preferred route to go back to Europe is not through the States. You get swabbed. Well, I do. When I leave South America, I get swabbed and put through every kind of X-ray machine and everything. So I don't like the way that the US Customs treats people. We're all treated like criminals. So I fly Bogota, and then I fly to the UK. The other alternative is to fly from Lima, and there's direct flights into Europe. There's direct flights into Madrid, Amsterdam, Paris. So before and straight after COVID, it was a stretch, because I live in Cusco, which is South Peru, I live in the Sacred Valley, which is where all the fun stuff is to see and do. And you've got to fly from Lima to Cusco. But the flight I take, Cusco to Bogota, and Bogota to London, cuts me down to 2 planes, which is nice. It's very nice. Because 3 or 4 planes is not very funny. And also flying past where you live, where you want to get off, flying past and having to fly back.
Just get a parachute and jump off.
That's a killer. If you've been flying for 15 hours and you fly past where you want to go, that is not nice. So
only to then fly back.
So yeah, that is the route. So yeah. And so when I got here, I was just open to meeting people, and the strangest things happen as it's supposed to work with magic, isn't it? It's supposed to, like, if you set your goal and then you open to what's possible. My ambition had always been or my dream had always been to have a healing center or a wellness center. And during the last few days that I was here, the guy who I met on the first night, I went into a restaurant, and the owner asked if they could play music in the corner. And there was a professional Mexican guitarist who was just passing through, and a guy that turned out to be my partner in the long run. And the owner of the restaurant, and another guy, and we were all sat around playing music. And he, the owner of the restaurant, showed me some land, beautiful, incredibly beautiful land, and said that he wanted to build a center. And I couldn't believe my ears. I was like, my God, this shit really happens. This manifestation stuff works. Well, it kind of didn't for me straight away, because I looked into it, and at the time, I always say I needed a resident visa. And at that time, this is 10 years ago, to create a business, it would have had to be in a Peruvian's name, and it would have had to be in his name, which meant all my savings and all my divorce settlement would need to go in a bank account in his name, in a company in his name. And I've known him
a lot of risk.
I mean, we did. I did come back to Peru because I'd left my stuff in the States, and I came back, and we looked into it, but yeah, my path was going more than one direction at that time. Like I said, I met my then future partner at the same time, and he was renovating his dad's house. He's turning it into a hostel, and he wanted my help with that, and I didn't want to put all my money into the name of somebody that I didn't know very well. And so that's what I ended up doing instead. I ended up in a family business. I didn't speak a word of Spanish. He spoke fairly good English because he'd had 4 or 5 years in Australia. When he'd just come back from Australia when I met him. And so, yeah, I ended up, my idea was that he's qualified as a guide, and he had this hotel space, and it's in just the most exquisite, beautiful little town. And at that time, now every single place here is a hotel, but at that time there wasn't many good places to stay. And my idea was that we'd create a sanctuary, and I'd still have my healing center, but it would be, as part of their family business. And so that's what I did. However, they didn't want to set things up, or I didn't understand. There's lots of things I didn't understand. His English probably wasn't as good as it needed to be for the vocabulary that I needed to process my visa and all those kinds of things. And his family business couldn't support that. So I ended up having to create my own business in my name. And so I spent I think I spent 3 or 4 years getting that business going. At the time, I thought it was our business. That turned out to be a big mistake. It wasn't. But when, and at that time as well, you could be here 6 months or you could be here a year, and then you could board a hop and come back. And people have been doing that and been here 10 years. But just around the time I'd done that, I'd been back to the UK or I'd been other places to renew my visa for about 4 years. And then it turned out that things were changing, and now you can't stay here more than, I think it's 6 months maximum, but 3 months is what they give you when you first come. And then you either need to create a business, which is what I did, have a baby, get married, or be an investor. So if you're at pension age and you want to come and you've got money that you can invest or receive a pension here, then that is another route. So they are the 4 routes to getting here. It's setting up a business. I would say that there's few barriers to entry compared to doing things in Europe or in the US. It's considerably easier. The downside, of course, is that for it to be easy, you need to have a reasonably good command of Spanish, or you need to pay an expensive lawyer. Initially, I paid an expensive lawyer. Now, I can do a lot of things for myself because, I had to learn the language. I was I was living in a family for 4 years, only hearing Spanish every day, and he would just disappear for days on end. So I was immersed, and so I learned Spanish. So
That's amazing. How long did that take you then to learn Spanish?
Well, I learnt like a baby. I learnt like a child. So for the first couple of years, I was just absorbing, and it was just you can't not learn new words. We learn new words in English. You can't not learn new words when they're matched with an action every day. So having breakfast, being asked to pass the salt, being asked for things, and I was quite lucky as well because my partner's mother, she's quite intuitive and I'm quite intuitive, and we could work each other out. And so I got to learn actions from, just words from actions and by doing. However, it took about 2.5 years to actually realize that my partner was telling me a load of nonsense. And when I was starting to get the lowdown from her about what the real situation was, and that he was in business with her, and everything that I'd bought was in her name, and I was a bit kind of like, oh, yeah. So big learning curve there, and I decided to go and set up my own business. I didn't really have a choice. I needed to get a visa. I have to say, by that point, we'd had a child. I think 2 years in, we had a child together. So, but at that time, you couldn't get residency through a child. Now you can. Now I have family residence because that's actually an easier route and more privileges than with a work residency. But at the time, I had to set up a business. And to be honest, it was just life steering me down a path that was better for me to go down, for me to create my own business under the circumstances with what I learned was going on. It was a better path for me, and I did that. And I created a healing center and a vegan restaurant, all designed to facilitate groups that I wanted, because I wanted to run retreats. And so I set all that up and I got all that going. I got just over break even when COVID hit. And just before COVID hit, my relationship also broke up. But by that point, we'd been together about 7 years. But cultural differences it wasn't working. It just wasn't working. Especially the things that I found out that had been happening behind my back when I was too naive to know. And so I went back to the UK, and then COVID struck and I got locked down there for 2 years. So I've been back here now for 2 years. And when I came back, I closed my business because I didn't want to go through another 2 years of getting to try to break even point. It just wasn't worth it. So I closed it, and my business was very well set up. I did pay an expensive lawyer, but it was a good investment. And the kind of business that I have enables me to do anything within my skills range. It was well written. And so I've just pivoted. I'm going to be running retreats, and I can do coaching online. And so I always continued doing a little bit of coaching work anyway, all through that time, because I'm also trained as a psychotherapist, and there's continued practice and continued learning and things like that. You get a bit of a break for having a baby, but I've kept my qualifications current. I've kept up with
your CPD's going.
Exactly. So and as a result of COVID and everybody becoming much more accustomed to being online, that's just made my life 10 times easier. Because back in the day, there was a lot of resistance about therapy online. It should be in person, even coaching. So all that changed to my favor, and so I came back. Luckily for me, my ex moved out during COVID, and so it was free for me to move back. And I have to tell you, that is when the real learning about this place started to come about, because I'd been quite isolated within the family, with him, or just running my business. And I had a lot more to learn about living abroad, about really living abroad, about the town, about surviving for myself. And I've enjoyed that, actually. I wouldn't have expected that. I was quite fearful of it. But the amount of self-work I did on myself during our breakup and during COVID made me stronger and equipped me. And I've learned very valuable lessons. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. Your story is incredible. Your journey from the UK down into Peru, back again, and I'm sure all the traveling in between is so such a pleasure for you to share with me. Obviously, it's very personal for you. It's not an easy story you've been through. It's not a story of all going up. There's obviously a roller coaster, but you seem to be in a very good place right now. And as you said, you've manifested it all to arrive at this one point, which I think your happiness kind of shows through. And that's a perfect way of ending the first part of the podcast, so we can go into a bit more in the next bit. So hello, welcome to section 2 of the podcast, all about being there. So Marie, you've given a wonderful in-depth introduction to your life and how you've got to the position you're in now. It's an incredible journey, such a roller coaster of emotions and experiences, but you said you seem to be thriving right now and have really rode the wave of life as an expat and someone who's travelled. So thank you for that. I guess my first kind of question is, what was your first impression when you did arrive in Peru? Obviously, you weren't expected to live there, but you still experienced it.
Well, do you know what I was? Because I my first night, I was locked out of where I'd reserved. I went back, it was pitch black. Nobody was answering the bell. And so I went back to the restaurant, and this is how I met my future partner. I was locked out, and he said, "Oh, don't worry about that. I've got a hostel." So I ended up back there, and he put me in the best room. It was on a balcony, and I woke up in the morning, and I walked out onto the patio to see, and the view was Ollantaytambo, which is where I live, the fortress, the Inca fortress, and it's a sight to behold. And on the other side of me is Pinkayuna, which is a sacred mountain with the god of Tanupa's face carved in the side of it. And when I did Incas and Aztecs in my history classes at school, I was blown away by ancient cultures, Egyptian culture too. I love Egypt as well. And I felt like a kid. I felt like I was in a history book, and I was so excited. And it's so beautiful here. You have to see it to believe it. You can't imagine how beautiful that this town is surrounded by mountains, and it's fresh air. It's even though we're at altitude and we're a little bit starved of oxygen, actually, it doesn't feel like that at all. And the energy of sacred land and the beauty, it was like, I mean, I would say homeless. I wasn't, I was homeless at the time. I hadn't decided where I was going to go, where I was going to be. And I literally stood on that balcony and went, I could live here. I could absolutely live here. And maybe I shouldn't have said it out loud, because that's what happened.
A little at first sight with the location.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it hasn't run out. I still pinch myself.
I mean, I've not done the furthest south I've been is Mexico. I've been to Chichen Itza and a lot of Tulum as well, and seen a lot of the Aztec kind of ruins, and that was incredible to learn all about that. I think, like you, when I was doing history, I really liked understanding about Egyptology and ancient Aztecs. I think playing Age of Empire as a kid as well helped that too. So I've done quite a lot. And I've got a lot of friends. One of my good friends, she lives in Colombia, and I've been meaning to go visit. So I'll definitely try and do a South American road trip, because Rainbow Mountain is on my list as well. I'd love to go to the Galapagos Islands.
There's so much in South America, isn't there? And Easter Island off Chile as well. And yeah, I haven't managed to do all of these things, but I definitely will. But yeah, it's breathtaking for sure. Yeah.
And can you go back to your time being in Peru? What was your first experience of the kind of culture, or the differences in culture compared to what you're used to? Obviously, you were well traveled, so you experienced different cultures. But how did that compare to, I guess, Western culture from what you grew up with or what you've seen in America?
I think this kind of entangles with my journey specifically, in that I think one of the reasons why life brought me here was that there's a lot of things I needed to learn. I was very naive, and I definitely needed to smarten up. I definitely needed to toughen up to be who I am now. And the culture, I didn't really accept that there was a culture shock. I was like I said, I was isolated, and there's something I'd chosen to do as well. I was just living in this family, and I didn't really, I didn't really look for any differences, and I was very much in my own culture's map of the world, and it was just like it's just like, this operating system is not computing. It's not computing. Error message. And I thought it was me. most of the time. And it's only been in the last 2 years where I've really understood, since I came back here, me and my son by ourselves. And, I didn't know that many people here outside of the family. And what I learned very, very quickly is that the things that I was suffering in that household are just very, very typical of the culture. And I hadn't accepted that or seen that as a thing. And so, this is a little agricultural town. Progress doesn't really happen. There's no such thing as female rights. There's no such thing as homosexuality. There's no such thing as any kind of ism. There's no honor, there's no morals, and the men drop their trousers in a blink of an eye. So the women are very controlling, and I was none of those things. So this is what I mean about things went wrong, because my partner was cheating with most of the guests behind my back, and I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. And since I've been back here and I've learned all the manipulation strategies, all the ways of getting my attention, and where they want that to result in. And it was a bit of a shock. I thought that was my biggest shock. And yeah, I mean, now I think, where the hell was my head before, to be honest? But there's also the fact that it's not wise to do anything without contract here, because there's quite a lot of colonial trauma. What I mean by that is that the mentality here is that if it's on the table now, you snatch it, because it won't be there tomorrow, and somebody else is going to take it. You don't. So coming here and expecting to be able to do a business or even grow a business with the local people is challenging and not very realistic. There's you've kind of got to understand that there isn't a mentality of investment for tomorrow. It's very much what is here now. You enjoy it. So in some ways, it's much more of an in the moment living, which is not always a bad thing. But when it comes to trying to grow something or invest and being able to trust, I thought that I could trust my partner. We had a baby together, and I had these new parents that told me that they'd never had a daughter and that I was like a daughter. It was just talk. It was just manipulative, buttering up talk. And you really can't do anything without a contract. And so, yeah, if I kind of covered from a working perspective, I don't now do anything without it being in writing, not even an agreement, not even a verbal agreement. My best friends now are the judges in this town, because I'm regularly in their office either asking advice or getting things written up, because it's very much the mentality of if it's there, get it, because we don't think about tomorrow. And I wouldn't say that that's all of Peru, by the way. This is a small mountain village, beautiful, incredibly beautiful mountain village, but progress hasn't happened here. Unfair to say that it's never happened. We've got Wi-Fi, there is access to outside information, but what I'm trying to say is that the better educated get out of here. I know, the better educated. If you can afford to educate your child, you would educate them in Cusco, or you would send them to Lima. So, that's I guess that's the downside.
Yeah. Well, on that topic, you said, so have you seen much of the other parts of Peru and experienced the other parts of the culture as well?
Yeah, they do differ. I have friends from Lima who are completely different. They're much more modern in their mentality. They're better educated. It's just it's the downside of it's the other side of a coin of an incredibly beautiful place. I guess I'm experiencing the extremes. It is a well preserved and beautiful archaeological place, and it's very natural, which is the upside of it. But the downside of it is that there's a lot of poverty. I mean, there are places higher up in the mountains in the communities where they live at a level on the World Poverty Index. It's second from the bottom, and the thing is, the interesting thing is as well, is there's another thing that I've learned is that we judge that as poverty, but they don't. They choose to live with earth floors. They choose to live in connection with the land. They understand the land. They love the land. There's less of an interest in creature comforts that you and I would not be able to cope without, which is not part of their way of life. And it's like I said, so for me, I judge that as progression hasn't happened. But they don't want that progression either. It's a life choice in a lot of ways. There's lots of families here that could afford a washing machine, but they don't have one. They could afford, things like refrigerators and TVs and computers, but they tend to be computers. There's shared places you can go to use a computer.
Internet cafe or...
Yeah, it's kind of just like the libreria, the local supply shop will have like 5 or 6 terminals, and the kids all amass there to play on the online gaming. But it's not, the children are still outside on the streets here. My son plays outside on the streets with the other kids. And yeah, I mean, it's very, very old-fashioned way of life. And for me personally, there's a lot of that I really like and value. But if you imagine people that have, some people that the furthest they've been is the main city, the furthest that they will have been is Cusco. They won't have seen outside this region. Some have been, there are some of the wealthier families here that have been to Lima, but not abroad. And it wasn't until last year that Peruvians could come to England. My partner wasn't able to come to England whilst I was with him. And the Schengen opened first, which was about, I think, just before the pandemic, maybe 5 years ago now, maybe less. So, that there isn't progress without information. And, Wi-Fi, when I first came here, wasn't strong enough for me to call home on a regular basis. So it's only really been in probably the last 7 years, that there's been a bigger influence from outside, if you know what to look for, or if you know to look. It's quite a huge culture shock.
I guess that's something people dream of as well, that especially in the city culture that we grew up in, you dream of being off-grid or being away from it. And there's that kind of sense of, being... There's an enlightenment in itself to have that kind of as a lifestyle. So it's a choice for some people to live on the earth, and like people go and build earth ships and live in the desert because they're sick of modern life. Now that is a wonderful way to be if that's how you wish to live. It's just the balance of that with having the progressive thinking and the inclusivity of it all as well, which I've seen only comes from traveling and meeting people from different backgrounds and experiences, usually of a position of privilege to be able to do that. Being from certain parts of the world, we have relative money, we can do that.
It's a huge privilege, because to know both is a huge privilege, and it does bring appreciation to things. And I have to say, I guess I'm quite adaptable and flexible. I mean, like, for example, in my house right now, the water goes off. I don't have a water tank. The hotels all have water tanks, so as a tourist, you'd never know any different. But the water goes off at 2:00 in the afternoon and doesn't come back on until 6. And then it goes off again around 8 all night, because I don't know why. The electricity sometimes goes off, sometimes for 3/4 of the day.
Hope it stays on now, though.
Yeah, you hope so. But these are things that don't give me stress. They probably would other people, but it doesn't give me a lot of stress. I just work around it. I understand some of the mentality here, and I appreciate the fact that I can go down my street and buy things from people's gardens, that people have grown things, and they're selling things from their little pieces of land, and how fresh things are. And that's the worst thing about coming home. Like when I come back to England and I go to the supermarket and I buy veg that's been refrigerated for I don't even know how long, whereas I'm used to eating things from the garden, you know.
Or you're buying the food which has come from the same place you've just come from, avocados from Peru or something. I could have brought them with me.
Exactly. In a better state as well, yeah.
Is there anything else you want to kind of mention about living in Peru, or your experience of your kind of life being there? Obviously, you have a child there. What has that been like relative to your family or friends who have children growing up in the UK?
Well, Tiago had 2 years he didn't have 2 years. We had 2 years in the UK. He probably out of that 2 years had 6 months, 8 months, I think, in total, over that 2 years in school because of COVID. It also meant that he didn't have education here. So that has been a challenge, I have to admit. I've put him a year back in school in Peru, which means that he's 18 months behind an education in England. However, this has been a process, a very stressful process of thought. But what I've come to decide upon is that the most important thing is communication skills ultimately, and he's bilingual. And he learned all his phonics so he can read in English in England. And he's been quite behind with his reading speed in Spanish because he had to get back into the rhythm of the language. He didn't really speak much Spanish when we were in England. But he's always grown. He's always been bilingual. So he's been a little bit slower. I came to the decision that I was thinking about when I was in school, and I was thinking about when I was doing trigonometry. That's quite a long time ago, but when I was doing trigonometry, we had to use logbooks because there was no trust that calculators were going to be a thing forever, and you needed to know how to look up the sin, cos, and tan in the logbook because you can't rely on calculators. And of course, nobody ever looks in a logbook anymore, and I think I was probably the last year that did that. But you know, we live in a world of AI now, and a lot of basic things that we currently do that, you know, people didn't do before they could use a calculator. We've just got that 100-fold with AI, and I have faith, trust, I don't know what, that we're all on a path to where we, you know, all children are on a path to where they need to go to express their purpose in their life, as we all are. And I trust that to some extent his soul chose this, and my priority for him is his language ability and his communication skills. And I'm just having faith that the weaknesses that he may suffer in his elementary education, will probably be overcome by AI. You know, if his if he doesn't leave school with English grammar and Spanish grammar as perfect as the top of the class person that's been through a full English education or a full Spanish education, c'est la vie, because I don't really think I had that when I left school anyway. So as long as he has exposure, and I do tons of stuff with him as well. With all my kids, I've got 2 older children, and I've always educated them outside of school, and so I've had to calm myself down because my 2 older children were educated in the best places you can imagine, the best schools. We moved numerous times to get the best schooling for them. So I was super education driven, and I've had to rethink that a lot. And I've really had to look at where I am and where he is today, and not just fall back on my previous beliefs and my previous experience with my 2 older children. And yeah, it's a new path that we're treading. So I would say, especially living where I live, I have found him a good school. I'm pleased with the school that he's in. But if you're a fan of academics, this would not be the place for you.
I guess with the growth in technology and the access to internet and education online now, the opportunity will only increase for anyone living in any rural area, because the transfer of information knowledge has improved so much. So hopefully that will only give opportunity to anyone living anywhere over time access to the best education or best resources to learn something. I did an engineering degree, and I learnt most from YouTube more than my lecturers. So
absolutely. And my son's always on YouTube. He does have the technology, and he is obviously he's privileged compared to his counterparts here, because we speak English at home. He's fluent in Spanish because his family speaks Spanish, and he goes to school in Spanish. And he's got this is his iPad that I'm on right now, and we use Khan Academy, and we're out a lot. We live in history, so and we travel quite a bit. So it's an alternative education, but I hope in the long run will equip him well.
I think it will. The one thing I remember from my childhood is the travelling I did with my parents and all the amazing places I got to visit. And that's fundamentally why I'm doing this podcast as well, is I believe that travelling and meeting people and speaking to people is how you grow and develop the most. Because interpersonal skills and chatting to people and being able to communicate is such an important skill of getting anything or understanding stuff. It's all well and good if you know how to solve astrophysics equations, but if you can't, articulate that in a certain way, then it doesn't matter. Is there anything else you wish to touch upon about living in Peru before we go to the next section?
No, I think that's pretty. I think I've covered it. I think so.
So hello, welcome to section 3 of the podcast, which I haven't actually named yet, and I keep saying this every time I do this podcast. I haven't named it, and I should do. But essentially, it's a review and a recap of your journey so far. And first of all, if you could go back in time to when you first started traveling or first moved abroad, what would be something or a little bit of advice you'd give yourself just to make it a bit easier or to prepare yourself for something?
Make friends with the Huesta Pass, the judge in the town. Make sure you've got things in writing for sure. That has been my biggest lesson for sure. Make sure things are clear. And I probably didn't have the inner strength to do that. I probably didn't have the self-worth back then that I've had to learn. and this is definitely the place to learn self-worth. The language, obviously, I've never been to a country and not learned the language. I don't think you can not learn it, because you just, like I said, actions come with words, and you just hear things repeatedly and you learn it. But it's so important to be able to communicate. How can that not be? I would say my advice would also be, think about how you can give back. You know, whenever you go somewhere, be part of the community, take part, contribute, give back. It's so important. I support things here. I'm invited to weddings and baptisms, and I go, and you donate money when you go there, and I do, and I participate. I go to the town parties. I learn the dances, and what I'm doing next we'll talk about the end. But through my offerings, through the things that I do, I bring work to local people. I involve them. I use their services. I use as big a variety of services that I can in my offerings. So, yeah, they're my three things. Keep things formal, keep things clear, learn the language, and give back.
That's incredible. And yeah, I think that's echoed all over the world, everywhere you visit, everywhere you go. I guess if you can do those three things, then you should thrive no matter where you are. So it's quite a universal toolkit to have, or a checklist maybe, of, what have you achieved at the time you've been there. And some things you can't, it's very difficult. As you said before, you had to find in yourself the strength to do a lot of those things, and a lot of people will be in that same situation. But acknowledging that as early as possible might be the quickest way of recovering or developing it. What's been your kind of favourite part of your journey so far?
The depths of understanding, actually. Understanding colonial trauma that has occurred. I can see how that's impacted. The Incan, my favourite is definitely the Inca trilogy. This idea of the snake, the underworld, shedding your skin, not being rigid all your life, letting phases go, letting your baggage go, letting go of things, being in the present, and growing out of a skin and letting the old one go. And the Puma aspect is about living life like a warrior with some ferocity and getting out there and catching your dinner. And the Condor aspect, connection to the earth, connection to your ancestors, connection to your guides. Yeah, that is definitely my favorite aspect of this place, the mysticism, the connection with the earth, and that philosophy of that ancient philosophy of living your life. I love it, and I use it.
That's so amazing and so interesting to learn a bit more about. Something I've not really known too much, because we're not taught too much about Incan culture in my education anyway. And something I would definitely go and research now, because it sounds incredible. And it just seems to echo a lot of life and a lot of things that I've kind of gone on a journey myself in the first 30 years of my life. So hopefully I can learn and transition in the future based on what you just said. going on back to kind of your life in Peru and everything else that you've gone through, what is your kind of next steps? Or where would you like to see yourself in the future? Do you see yourself staying in Peru? Obviously, you've got this amazing business coming up, which I'll allow you to share a bit more about. But is that the kind of the end goal, or?
Yeah. I would never say where I'm going to end up, because I'm very much a free spirit. I like to go somewhere and go, I'd like to live here for a while, So I have, like I said, I started a business way back, and I did end up having a centre, but I closed it after COVID. And so because of our lives becoming more virtual and it being more acceptable being online, I coach online now, and I've created 7 retreats for next year. So I bring people here. I bring people to learn from the land and to experience part of the journey that I've been on for themselves. So I have a retreat that we look at finding your truth, connecting with the land, connecting with your ancestors, finding your inner compass, and gaining that self-awareness about what is right for you. So connection to your heart. I use San Pedro. This is I've forgotten about that. This is the land of sacred medicine, plant medicines. So I can't believe I didn't mention that. So yeah, I use San Pedro in my retreats to help people open their heart and really understand their own direction uniquely, that will put their gifts and talents into practice. So that's one of my retreats. The other one, I take people to the jungle. We go to the Amazon basin. We go to Manu, which is incredible. It's one of the densest places. It's protected for wildlife. And in that retreat, we do ayahuasca, and that is the snake part of the trilogy. That is letting that old skin go, dropping past pain, and the magic of ayahuasca for me is that it gives you a sense of the power of your own love. So, we often give out love that we want to receive. We're giving it out and hoping we're going to receive it back. And the gift that Mama Ayahuasca gives is to enable you to feel your own heart, feel that your own sense of love, and give it back to yourself. And when you do that, your perspective of life changes, and you can let go of so much stuff. You can reframe so many aspects of your life and let go of things, and it sends you on a journey. It continues to guide you. It continues to put you through a process. And obviously I help with that. I on my retreat, there's integration time for us to work through those things. And so one retreat's here in the Sacred Valley, the other retreat, and we go down to the Lake Titicaca as well. The other one is in the jungle and then in the Sacred Valley. And then my third one is the Inca trilogy, where we do all 3. We do the snake part in the jungle. We do the condor part here in the Sacred Valley, because this is the land of the condor. And then we do an integration week, and we go all the way down to Lake Titicaca and to Tiwanaku in Bolivia, and the islands of the sun and the moon, which have Puma temples. And we ground everything that we've learned, and decide how it's going to happen, how all those teachings and all those learnings are going to be put into practice. So I'm pretty excited. You can tell I'm pretty excited about my retreats next year, and And so that's what I'm going to be doing for sure next year. After that, I don't know. It's going to be down to where both of us are at. My son is 9, turning 10 at the beginning of next year. And we'll see, because I would like to be running retreats in more places. I think I will always run retreats here, because this is my soul home, and it's my son is half Peruvian. So, and I do always want to maintain my Spanish. So I will always be coming back. But I love sacred spaces. So I would like to be doing retreats in Egypt in the future, and maybe some parts of the Far East. Who knows? Who knows? You know, I'm an adventurer, a traveler at heart. So
it's great to see how much passion you talk with as well. When you talk about your retreats coming up next year, you can really see, and it kind of exuberates from you in terms of how much you love what you're doing. So that's amazing from my side. And just want to think, thank you for sharing it with me, and everyone who's listening. I'm sure they're all inspired by you to really kind of follow in this journey in footsteps.
It's such a magical place. I hope I inspire people to come here, even not just with me, just, come and experience Peru. Wonderful.
And what is the name of the kind of retreats you're running, so people can find them?
Oh, okay. My website is almaamor.com. That means soul love in Spanish. almaamor.com is my website, and it's all up there. Just look under retreats. You'll find my 3 offerings if you want to explore and you don't want to do it by yourself. My pleasure to be the guide. However, it's not just a tour. It's an inner and outward journey. So bear that in mind. If you're going to come with me, you're going to be working on the inside as well as the outside.
That's incredible. I'll put a link in the show notes for people to be able to find it that way as well. So thank you so much, Marie, for sharing your incredible story. The depths of it, not just the highlights, but also the lowlights, and your journey and how you've had to, I guess, grow as a human being. Look inside and find what truly, I guess, grounds you as a person, and what you want to go on to. I'm sure people have been inspired by you and really, found parallels in their own lives, which they can take and be inspired by your journey. So thank you just for being here and sharing that.
Well, it's my pleasure, really.
And as always, if people have found it interesting, please get in touch, and I'm sure Marie will happily share more information, or you can join her in one of her many retreats in the future. And we'll see you next time, the Expat Pod.